and the silence stretches like a blade. They thought I was fragile, predictable, another shadow in their crowded room. They wanted me to play along, to laugh when they laughed, to break when they pressed too hard. But silence was the only answer they never expected. It made them restless, because how do you measure a storm that doesn't announce itself? They looked into my eyes and saw nothing they could track, nothing they could record. That emptiness was the first thing that tore their certainty apart. I learned quickly, words are cheap, noise is desperate, and reactions are gifts. The moment you refuse to give them what they crave, they start to drown in their own echoes. They need your anger. They need your protest. They need you to play their game. But I stopped playing. I gave them silence, pure, unbroken, merciless silence. And suddenly, I wasn't the weak one anymore. I was the mirror they couldn't stand to face. They mocked me, of course. They wanted me to answer, to defend, to prove myself. I didn't. I just watched, a smirk threatening at the corner of my mouth. Not because I cared, but because their panic tasted sweeter than any applause. They wanted the joke, but the punchline was already written across their trembling faces. Silence became my laughter. Every stare, every insult, every little push. They thought it would carve me open. Instead, it carved them, because nothing unsettles the loud like someone who refuses to make a sound. They thought silence meant weakness, but it was the rope, and they tied it around their own throats. And me? I sat there, unbothered, the smile never leaving. Silence was my trick. Silence was my weapon. Silence became the only thing that mattered. And they never saw it coming. Noise. It never ends. The crowd, the whispers, the sneers. They believe volume equals power, that the one who shouts loudest wins. But the louder they screamed, the less I heard. Their words became static, empty signals bouncing off the walls of a hollow room. They tried to bury me beneath their noise, but the truth, I was already beyond their reach. They mistook my silence for absence, for surrender. Fools. They didn't realize silence is not the void. It is the weight pressing on their lungs, the pressure building behind their eyes. Every time they laughed, I heard the cracks in their confidence. Every insult was a confession. Every attempt to provoke was a desperate plea. Notice me. Please react. Please make me real. But I didn't. And that refusal broke them more than any retaliation ever could. I watched them swarm, desperate to corner me. They wanted chaos, a reaction, a glimpse of weakness. I gave them stillness instead. The more I withheld, the more their certainty rotted. You could see it in their shifting eyes, in the way their laughter turned nervous, in how their voices trailed off when they realized I wasn't playing. The silence wasn't mine anymore, it owned them. Their anger was supposed to be my cage. Their noise was supposed to drown me, but it backfired. The cage became theirs. The noise became their prison, and me, I sat in the middle, untouched, untouchable, the smile widening because I knew what they didn't. Silence always wins. The crowd wanted a victim, but what they got was a reflection of their own emptiness. And when they finally paused for air, when the shouting died just enough, they saw me sitting there, quiet, grinning, unshaken. That's when the first spark of fear lit in their eyes, because they realized the silence wasn't going away. Control. They never had it. Not really. They only believed they did because I let them. The noise, the pressure, the endless attempts to bend me. It was all theater. They wrote the script, handed me the role of the broken one, the silent one, the forgotten one. But here's the joke. Silence isn't absence. Silence rewrites the script without a single word. The more I refused to react, the more their confidence crumbled. I saw it in the way they shifted uneasily, the way their laughter cracked, the way their eyes darted to each other for reassurance. They couldn't track me, couldn't measure me, couldn't predict when or if I'd ever move. And that uncertainty was poison, dripping slow, corroding everything they thought was solid. You see, control doesn't belong to the one who speaks loudest. It belongs to the one who doesn't need to speak at all. While they wasted breath proving themselves, I conserved mine. While they flailed in desperation, I simply sat back and let their own panic consume them. The silence wasn't mine. It became the arena itself. Every corner, every shadow, every heartbeat in that room answered to me. I didn't fight for control. I didn't even take it. They gave it to me, piece by piece, each time they stumbled over their own words, each time their voices cracked under the weight of my stillness. And when they realized what had happened, it was already too late. Silence had wrapped around their throats, invisible but unshakable. That's the part they'll never admit, that I didn't need to lift a finger. I didn't need rage. I didn't need revenge. I only needed the one thing they couldn't handle. Silence. And the punchline? It controlled them more than fear ever could. Pressure. It built like smoke in a locked room, filling every corner, choking every breath. They circled closer, their voices sharper, their gestures louder, desperate to break me. They thought if they pressed hard enough, I'd finally crack. I'd finally give them the performance they were starving for. But I didn't. I sat there, still, unflinching, the silence growing heavier with every attempt. The truth is, pressure doesn't destroy, it reveals. And what it revealed wasn't weakness. It was the simple fact that they needed me more than I ever needed them. Their whole theater of humiliation, their carnival of noise, it only worked if I played my part. But I refused. My silence left their script unfinished, their act meaningless. Without my reaction, they were just clowns screaming at an empty stage. I watched the cracks widen, laughter turned brittle, eyes darted, shoulders tightened. Each second I stayed unmoved, the more their own pressure suffocated them. They wanted to see me bleed, but instead they bled uncertainty. They wanted to see me collapse, but instead they collapsed inward, devoured by the silence they couldn't escape. That's the part they never understood. Silence isn't retreat, it's resistance. It's defiance without a word, rebellion without a gesture. It's the one weapon they can't steal, can't twist, can't corrupt. Every second I refused to answer, I stripped their power away, and they felt it. You could see it in the way their bravado trembled, in the way their voices cracked. In the end, the pressure didn't crush me, it crushed them. They built the trap, they set the stage, they tightened the noose, and all I had to do was sit in silence and let them pull it shut around their own necks. That's the joke, that's the punchline they'll never laugh at. Break. That's what they waited for. The shatter, the scream, the collapse. But it never came. Instead, something else rose. Not anger, not despair. Something sharper, something colder. A smile that didn't belong to them. A silence that no one could command. They thought they had cornered me, stripped me bare, but in the silence I became untouchable. In the silence, I became the one thing they feared, free from their control. It wasn't weakness that kept me quiet, it was clarity. Words could never cage me because I stopped speaking their language. Their noise was currency in a broken market, and I refused to trade. My silence was inflation. It made their voices worthless. Every shout devalued them. Every taunt exposed how little they mattered. They didn't see it, but I did. And once you see, you can't unsee. The joke is simple. They thought silence was the absence of power, but silence is power. It seeps under their skin. It echoes in their thoughts long after the noise has died. It forces them to face themselves without distraction, and nothing terrifies them more than that. I didn't need to destroy them. They destroyed themselves, trying to fill the silence I left behind. From that moment, I was no longer in their game. I was the shadow behind the laughter, the pause between their words, the stillness they couldn't erase. They didn't break me, they built me. Every attempt to bury me only pushed me deeper into the silence that became my foundation. And now no one can touch me, because silence isn't empty. Silence is mine. Subscribe, not for me, not for them, for the silence that scared them more than your voice ever could. Because the moment you stop explaining, you stop belonging. Stillness. That's all it took. I didn't need rage. I didn't need chaos. Just stillness. Because while they wasted their breath trying to measure me, I was already rewriting the rules of the room. My silence wasn't absence anymore. It was presence. Heavy, undeniable, unshakable. The kind of presence that lingers even when I'm not there. I watched them stumble over their own laughter, tripping on words that once sounded sharp, but now rang hollow. Every attempt to provoke me slid into emptiness, swallowed whole by the void I carried with me. They didn't realize it yet, but they were orbiting me now. Their energy, their anger, their noise, it all revolved around my refusal to respond. I became their gravity. Power doesn't come from speaking louder. It comes from making silence louder than sound. And they felt it. You could see it in the way their confidence faltered, the way their voices lost their edge, the way their eyes lingered too long on me as if waiting for something, anything. But nothing came. That nothing was everything. My smile wasn't for them. My silence wasn't for them. It was mine. And in that ownership, I discovered a kind of strength they could never touch. Because they are addicted to noise. They need it. They live inside it. Take it away and they collapse. Me? I don't need it. I don't need them. I don't need anything but the silence they can't survive. That's when I realized I didn't escape them. They never had me. All along it was them locked inside the noise, screaming for validation, choking on their own need to be seen. And me, I was already gone, untouchable, carried by the silence they could never track. That's not weakness, that's power, pure, unbroken, merciless power. Wait. That's what they felt when I entered a room. Not my words, not my actions, but the weight of my silence pressing against their skin. They tried to ignore it, tried to laugh through it, but the tension betrayed them. Their shoulders stiffened, their smiles cracked, and their voices faltered. They thought silence was nothing. They were wrong. Silence was everything, and it was mine. I didn't need to speak to control them. The absence of sound became the command. Every glance I gave, every smirk I let slip, it was enough. They leaned forward, waiting, begging for me to break character, but there was no character. This was who I was now, and that realization sank into them like poison. The stronger I grew in silence, the weaker they became in their noise. They filled the air with empty shouts, desperate to drown me out, but all it did was expose how hollow they were. Their chaos became background static, and my silence was the sharp edge cutting through it all. The louder they screamed, the deeper my control sank. Power isn't about making them hear you. Power is making them hear themselves in the void you leave behind. Every second they searched for my reaction, they found only their own reflection, distorted and ugly. That was the true punchline. They couldn't escape themselves, and I didn't have to lift a finger. So I stayed still, I stayed quiet, and I let the silence do the work. They thought I was playing a game, but games have rules. Silence doesn't. Silence rewrites the rules every time you refuse to speak. That's why I never lose. Echo. That's all they heard when they spoke, an echo bouncing back at them, twisted by the silence I left behind. They wanted me to answer, to break, to prove I was still playing their game. But every word they threw dissolved into nothing, and nothing is heavier than silence. By then, it wasn't just me ignoring them, it was the silence itself devouring them. Rooms felt smaller when I entered, clocks ticked louder. Their laughter didn't sound like laughter anymore. It sounded like fear in disguise. They weren't afraid of me. They were afraid of what my silence revealed about them. Without noise, without the show, they were nothing, and they knew it. Control doesn't need to shout, it doesn't need to strike, it sits quietly, waiting until the world bends to its rhythm. That was the rhythm I carried now. I didn't need to raise my voice, I didn't need to move fast, I just existed, and my existence was enough to tilt the balance. They thought monsters roar, that demons scream, that power is loud. But the truth, the deadliest presence is the one that doesn't announce itself. The shadow in the corner, the grin in the silence, the storm you never hear until it's already over you. That was me. That's all I had to be. And the best part, they built it themselves. Every insult, every attempt to break me, every desperate laugh, they forged the silence that now held them captive. I didn't rise in spite of them. I rose because of them. They wrote the joke. I became the punchline. And in the silence, I was untouchable. Shadow. That's what I became to them. Not a voice, not a face, not even a person. Just a shadow that filled the space between their words. The silence followed me like a storm cloud, and the moment I stepped into a room, the temperature dropped. They felt it in their bones, though none of them could explain it. Some laughed harder, some spoke faster, some looked away. But all of them knew. You can fake strength with noise, you can fake confidence with laughter, but you can't fake the way your body reacts to silence. The air thickens, breathing feels heavier, even the walls seem closer. They thought they were in control until they realized it wasn't me they were fighting, it was the silence itself pressing against them. It didn't matter what I said anymore, because I didn't need to say anything. My stillness carried further than their shouts ever could. They couldn't drown it, couldn't bury it, couldn't track it, and so it spread, seeping into their thoughts, their dreams, their nights when everything else was quiet. That's when it hit them. Silence doesn't end when I leave. Silence follows. I never had to raise my hand. I never had to strike. My silence was enough to break rhythm, to fracture the air, to make every glance at me feel like staring into something they couldn't define. They wanted me gone, but deep down, they needed me there, because without me, they'd be forced to face the noise inside themselves. That's the final cruelty of silence. It doesn't need chains. It doesn't need walls. It only needs to exist. And once it takes hold, it never lets go. They thought they owned me, but now, everywhere they go, they carry me with them. They carry the silence. End. That's the word they feared the most, not because I spoke it, but because they knew it was coming, carved into every second of silence I left behind. They wanted closure, an explanation, a reason, but I don't explain. I don't reassure, I don't give them the comfort of knowing why. That's not silence, that's noise. I didn't rise to prove them wrong. I didn't survive to show them strength. I became something else entirely, something they can't categorize, can't predict, can't control. They thought they could track me, define me, write me into their story. But silence doesn't belong in their script. Silence writes its own. And now, every glance, every whisper, every laugh they throw feels hollow because they remember what silence did to them. They remember how it cracked their voices, how it pulled the ground from under their feet. They remember that they weren't afraid of me. They were afraid of what I left behind. That's the truth they'll never admit. I didn't need to destroy them. They destroyed themselves, trying to fight what can't be fought. Silence doesn't shout, it doesn't beg, it doesn't forgive, it just is. And now so am I. I am the pause they'll never escape. I am the grin they'll never forget. I am silence. And silence controls everything.